What do you make of this? Because this was an embarrassing loss, in my opinion. What do you make of just how poorly this went?
Um, yeah, I think that this continues the narrative of the Jazz struggling against teams that don't have an established big that is constantly playing a huge role on the team, and the team is able to create matchup problems and put the Jazz in bad situations. And I look at last night; it must have been, not even exaggerating, throughout the entire game last night, it must have been at least 10 times where the Washington Wizards got Bradley Beal on the bogey, and he took advantage, of course. I look at Russell Westbrook, and he was bowling Royce O'Neal for most of the game. And so I just think they were creating matchups that were advantageous to them, and they were making shots. I mean, give them credit. They were making shots and running good offense. So, there's this thought in Jazz Nation that the Jazz are an elite team, but what I'm telling you is on any given night, any NBA team can beat you, and the Jazz are starting to figure that out, that this isn't going to be some easy run to the finals.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really stands out to me is the point that I have made for several weeks now, and I'll make it again right now. It continues to be a situation where the Jazz cannot handle small teams that attack the paint. And I just don't understand it. I look at some of the situations last night. Bradley Beal going right at Rudy Gobert. I mean, just attacking him. Getting layups, getting fouled. The Wizards attacking Rudy Gobert on the Jazz offensive end, fouling him. At one point, 1 for 8 from the free throw line.
Yeah.
Missed his first 7 free throws. I look at Bojan Bogdanovic. This is a real problem now. And my question, Jake, is at what point does Quinn Snyder have to look at limiting his minutes and making a change at the power forward? Because Bojan Bogdanovic is killing them right now.
Yeah, he's definitely a liability, and I think that liability is always offset by his ability to make shots. But when you're not making a lot of shots, you're a minus player, as they say. You're giving up more points than you're giving the team, and so I think that time is now. I think Quinn Snyder's got to figure out how to get this thing back going in the right direction. I'm not saying that the Jazz are somehow going to tailspin and not make the playoffs or something, but there's a big difference between being a 1 seed and a 5 seed, and if you continue to lose games like this, you will fall in the rankings very quickly in the West because of how tight it is. The West is not a conference that is spread out, and second place to third place is 8 games. I mean, you're talking about the top 3 teams being spread out, and then everything after that is tight. And so if you were to somehow fall the 3 seed, there's no telling how far you would actually fall. And that's a concerning thing.
Yeah, and I think the thing that is most concerning to me is that I just don't see how you fix this.
Uh-huh.
And for the Jazz, I think you fix it by making the ball go through the hoop from 3.
Yeah.
That's the only way back here because you have 0 game with your back to the basket. This team has gotten away from individual performances.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing that's really troubling is they're terrible defensively. There were times last night, and I don't know, you tell me if I'm exaggerating this, but there were times last night where they had no semblance of a defense. They lost the points in the paint again because they've become so reliant on the 3 that they're not able to stop any kind of momentum. You watch the second half of this game and you were expecting a third quarter run, which you got, but the Wizards were easily able to overcome that because the Jazz were not playing defense.
Right.
And I also look at Donovan Mitchell. I don't see a willing and wanting defender in Donovan Mitchell.
Uh-huh.
He is just letting guys go by because he thinks Rudy Gobert is going to be there. And I don't think that style of defense is going to take you very far.
Right.
So my question is, again, is this an offensive problem or is this more of a defensive problem?
I think that everything in the NBA starts on the defensive end for teams. If you can have an elite defense, which this is the problem. The Jazz are known as an elite defensive team. That's been their trademark for the last several seasons. And they're not doing that right now. So the effect that has is, hey, we're not going to play defense. We're going to give up 100 whatever it was last night, 20 some odd points or whatever. And you give up all these points, which means you're not getting out in transition, which means you're not getting the dagger transition threes that we all know and love to see the Jazz hit. And what that then means is you have to run a lot of half-court offense, and they are not a half-court offense team. They are not a team that has a bunch of talent that can go ahead and score on their own and can make things happen. Donovan Mitchell puts up 42 points last night, and it's not nearly good enough. It's not nearly good enough because 42 points out of one guy is not going to win you an NBA game. And this is why I say, again, it's not a Rudy Gobert issue. It's a roster issue. And the roster issue comes in when you're now saying to your fans and you're saying in the front office, well, Rudy's on the $200 million deal. We got to pay Donovan. We're paying Donovan. So where do we go from here? Where are we going to get more resources to go and get somebody? And the answer is you're not. This is who you are, right? This is like you're not going to go out and reinvent this whole team now. You're not going to go out and make some crazy move because of where your money's at. And so that's why I'm so critical of the Rudy deal, because I just think that you committed all of this financial responsibility to him, and he's not going to give you the proper, gain with it. Like when you pay somebody that much money, when you pay, LeBron all that money, at least you're going to the postseason no matter what, and you're probably going to make a finals appearance no matter what. Right? When you pay all these guys big money, they're giving you something. Rudy on some nights will give you a big performance, and on other nights he doesn't show up, right? He gives you 9 points and 12 rebounds. That's not showing up for Rudy Gobert. So my point just is this a defensive or an offensive problem? I think it's a problem all around because they don't have a roster that can compete at the highest levels right now.
Do you point fingers at people? Because I do.
It starts in the front office. Honestly,
this
goes back. Again, we've talked about this on the show, and this pisses Jazz fans off, and I understand why it does. We go back to the draft and the missed draft picks, right? It started there. Okay, we missed on the draft picks, but we've got a solid team here. We've got a postseason team here every single year. So it's not like your team sucks, but we're tired of talking about being a postseason team. We want to be a finals team now. And I don't think people have a true appreciation for how big that gap is. Being an NBA Finals team versus being a postseason team is totally different, right? And so now this roster is in a place where it's a postseason team, but it doesn't have enough firepower potentially it has enough firepower to get to the finals. There's no chance that this team right now is winning an NBA Finals with the way it's constructed, because now what's happened is teams have figured out, okay, they're a 3-and-D team. Rudy Gobert has no offensive ability, so here's how we're going to run at them, and it's really effective because they're getting high percentage look after high percentage look.
Yeah, I think the contract for Rudy Gobert is a huge problem on a couple of levels. One, it means you're committed to him. It means that offensively, and we saw this again over this stretch of games where they've really played poorly, going all the way back to Charlotte is where I really feel like they kind of fell apart. But I look at the way that Rudy Gobert has been minimized by teams in the fourth quarter. I look at the record-setting performance the other night, and you quickly realize that only happened because everybody else couldn't shoot or make jumpers, and he got a lot of offensive rebounds, which is great. I mean, that's his job. But if Rudy Gobert is putting up those kinds of numbers, the Utah Jazz are in trouble. They're not going to win games. So when we talk about his contract, I mean, it is a real problem. And then I start looking at numbers in the paint. 54-38, the Wizards outscored the Jazz in the paint. Westbrook and Beal combined for 78 points on only 6 made threes. They were getting to the basket.
Yeah.
Let that in the pauses, because let that sink in. Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook combined for 78 points.
Yeah.
And they only scored 18 from the free throw line.
Yeah.
So 60 of their 78 came in the paint. Where's the rim protection? The problem is that Rudy doesn't have an assignment against small teams.
And what were they doing, though, because Lopez was in the game? The problem is Lopez can shoot. So he's pulling Rudy away when he's in the game. When he's not in the game, we're pulling Rudy away because he's guarding a small guy.
Well, and I think what you see is when you have, because you're not worried about Lopez against Washington. You're worried about Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. And Westbrook was hitting those threes. As soon as Westbrook was hitting threes early in this game, I think you knew it was going to be a long night, because that really opens you up to him penetrating in either kicking to Beal or getting to the basket. And he did both. And the other thing I think that stands out so glaringly in this game is Donovan Mitchell's effort. And it's going to be covered up because he scored 42 points, had a great night. People are going to talk about the fact that Jingles had a career high and he finally scored 30 points. Their defense was terrible. Donovan Mitchell has to do better than this. And that's what I think a lot of people will struggle with. Donovan Mitchell has to be a better player. He has to be a better leader. He has to do the leading and be a leader on the defensive end of the floor, not the offensive end. Because I'm telling you right now, I watched that Laker game last night, and I see LeBron James getting in guys' ear. I see him going after other guys on the floor, Dennis Schroeder included, because Dennis Schroeder played the wrong side of a pick and roll, and it wound up leading to a layup. Who's going to do that to Donovan Mitchell? Who's going to say, hey, Donovan, at the end of the game there, you can't just be a turnstile for a Russell Westbrook layup. You can't not rebound. Like in one possession, Donovan Mitchell didn't go attack a rebound, and it wound up leading to a second and then a third possession that Bradley Beal capped with a three-pointer.
Yeah.
Like that's why you're losing these games.
Uh-huh.
And I think that when you want to point blame or point fingers, I think that blame and those fingers need to be pointed squarely at Quinn Snyder, because now it's on Quinn Snyder to make an adjustment. You have to limit Bojan Bogdanovic's minutes. And so I simply ask, where is Ersan Ilyasova, and what the heck is he doing here?
Yeah, my guess is he's probably training. He's probably getting into game shape. That's what I would think.
That's the only thing that I can think of. And I look at a lot of these situations with Bojan, and you realize that he just is not capable of defending wings.
Yeah.
He's not.
He's not.
And the problem is that he knows that laterally he does not have the quicks to stay with a guy like Bradley Beal. So what does he do to compensate for that? He stands off of him. So what is Bradley Beal doing?
He's
knocking down threes. And so you get a little closer to him and Beal goes by him. And the problem is guys like Bradley Beal are not scared of Rudy Gobert. Yeah. They're going to attack harder because Gobert is there.
Yeah.
And it leads to fouls. It's very difficult to be Rudy Gobert and not foul a guy who's attacking you. But the funny thing is, I think his first foul came in the fourth quarter, because there were so many open layups that he was not even in position to get the foul.
Yeah.
That's the problem with this Jazz team right now. And frankly, I think the Lakers now move to the favorites. Vegas moved the line overnight as well. I think the Lakers moved to the favorites to win the West after a really putrid performance out of the Suns last night. Shocking that they played such poor basketball.
Yeah, the Jazz are... I'm not ready to say the Jazz are in trouble, but I think I am...
Wow, really?
Yeah, well, because I think it's...
The Jazz are in trouble.
Well... Maybe not. I don't know. I think that the Jazz, when you live and die in the three, it's a night-to-night thing. And I think that the Jazz have to figure out what it is that they're going to do defensively to get back to who they've been. Like what are we going to do to get back to being a defensive-minded juggernaut? I mean, because that's who they've been. That they are known for that, and they're just not doing it. And so, yeah, I would agree. It's on Quinn to get this going. I don't think the Jazz, to answer the obvious question of, okay, if they're not in trouble now, when would they be in trouble? I think they would be in trouble if you go ahead and you lose. I mean, how many games are they in now after the All-Star break? I think this was their second game after the break,
or third,
right?
Something like that, yeah.
So, I mean, if you go, I would say you're in trouble if you lose. If you get to, you lose your first 5 out of 7 coming out of the break, then I would say you're in a full-on tailspin. You're not doing well at that point. But to say that they're in trouble losing 2 games in a row out of the break, I think it's more, hey, we got to figure out what it is that we're doing. Like, are we going to be an offensive team? Are we going to be a defensive team? The obvious answer is defensive, and we have to figure out how we're going to do that. And yeah, I think Bogdanovic is a huge problem right now. He is a hole in the side of your ship on the defensive end that you cannot fix right now.
Well, and I think the other defensive problem is Rudy Gobert. Not that he's poor defensively, but I thought there was a real important stretch in that game last night where Derek Favors was in. They needed a bailout. They threw it to Favors at the top of the key, and he hit the jumper.
Yeah.
And he is a very good mid-range jump shooter for a big man. I think you need more of that. I just don't know, is Bogdanovic the guy to do that? He hasn't been a mid-range player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where the back to the basket went, because I thought when they came out the other night in, what was that? I guess Boston, when he in the third quarter had those 2 straight possessions where he was on the block. I thought that was really good basketball out of the Jazz. We didn't see that last night.
Yeah.
So
and the other thing I see on the offensive end is the lack of ball movement too. I was watching the Suns against the Wolves last night, and the Suns had this beautiful. Most of the game they played poorly, but they had one possession in particular where they had this beautiful ball movement. They get a good look, they miss the look, but they offensive rebound as a team. They reset it, and the ball is just flying around, and it leads to a wide open 3 for Jay Crowder in the corner, which he obviously knocks down, and so. That just was so indicative of what the Jazz are not doing right now. The Jazz have been known to make highlight reels for moving the ball and getting open looks, and they're not doing it. I'm telling you, they're way too reliant on pick and roll, and they're way too reliant on just settling for a 3, and that's killing them right now because they're not making the threes, which is what we told you would happen.
Well, when they get back home on Wednesday, they really need to have figured this out. I mean, they are in Tampa to take on Toronto tonight. Which I think is a real big ask right now.
Yeah.
Especially with the mobile size in the paint that Toronto brings. Then they go to Chicago to finish out this trip on Monday, so they're off this weekend, which I think is a much needed break. And then you come home for Brooklyn back-to-back Friday, Saturday next weekend against Memphis, and then Cleveland.
Yeah.
Those are games you should win in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And the problem is obviously that Memphis is not playing well right now, but they're athletic. They're really difficult to guard. Yeah. And then Cleveland's just playing their asses off. But one other critical thing that's going to change by the time that they get those 2 Memphis games. The NBA trade deadline's a week from yesterday.
Uh-huh.
And the question is, do the Jazz realize that they have a huge hole in their roster and they've got to fix it?
I would hope so. I mean, I don't know how you can't see it. If you're anybody, you can see what the issue is on the defensive end. You know, when Bogdanovic is in the game. But I think the question is more philosophical. What are they thinking? What is their mindset? Is their mindset, hey, we're playing in an offensive-based league because the NBA is an offense-first league, or are we going to be that defensive team in an offensive league? Are we going to be a team that's built to stop teams, and we're going to use that defense to get out in transition? I mean, that's really, what my first question would be. Now, if it was me and I was making the decision, I would be adding offense to this team immediately. I would be adding some sort of a wing scorer, somebody who is really athletic, can get their own shot when they need to. So then, that relieves the pressure on Donovan because again, I'll maintain that there really just isn't another guy. Like, yeah, that's great. Jingles put up 30 last night. That's not who he is. He's never been that guy. He's a 20-point-a-night guy. Give me 4 assists. Give me a couple rebounds. That's who he is. And so Donovan really does not have a running mate.
Well, and I continue to say a lot of people want it to be Jordan Clarkson. He's a 6th man at best. There's a reason he isn't a starter in Los Angeles right now for the Lakers or Cleveland with the Cavs. Like, he's had opportunities to be the guy.
Yeah.
And that's just not who Clarkson is as a player. And I continue to maintain that they need to make a Bradley Beal type trade. They need to go and get a legit number 2. And really, maybe it's a legit number 1 because what did you say on text last night?
I don't know that Donovan Mitchell's a superstar, man. I look at this team, and superstars in this league again are going to be the LeBrons, the KDs, the Steph Currys, that caliber of player.
Do you put him with Dame?
I think he's one level below Dame. I think Dame's got a lot more leadership happening, in his game than Donovan does, and
Book?
I think. I would say Book leads his team more too. I mean, skill-wise, they're pretty much the same player, but I think leadership-wise, I think Book has more going for him in that category.
I mean, I'm trying to think of a comp on Donovan Mitchell, even in like the Eastern Conference. I mean, is he Tatum?
Yeah, he's Tatum.
Is he? Yes. You look at some of the guys. Like, I mean, there are really good teams in the East. Who's the best player on Milwaukee? Is he Giannis? I think I'd rather have Donovan than Giannis, but Giannis does a lot more, it seems like.
Yeah.
He's a lot more dynamic, it feels like, especially defensively. I look in Philly, I'd rather have Donovan than either of their 2 studs. Simmons and Embiid, because I just don't think you can count on Embiid to be healthy enough. And I think Simmons is so limited offensively.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys I'd choose over Donovan. Like I look at the triumvirate in Brooklyn, those guys are on a different level.
But I want to be clear, I'm not saying that he's not a good player, right? Like on the floor, jump shot, stats, all that stuff. Like he's right
sure.
with all those guys. But what I'm saying is that when you look at the Jazz and they're struggling last night, I don't want to see Donovan bitching to the official. I don't want to see him going the easy route,
throwing his hands up in the air,
like you need to be a grounding force for your team. You've got to be the rock,
and that's why that fourth quarter possession at the end of the game, where the pick and roll was ineffective for Washington, and then Westbrook just blows right by him.
Yeah, he just goes by him.
Like that's where I want to see Donovan Mitchell take that, almost that mentality of slapping your hands on the floor and being a defensive stud, because he's capable of it, and we've seen it.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing it. And is it fatigue? Is it maybe Donovan's just not there? I don't know. Maybe to your point, Jake, maybe he's just not ready to be that guy. But that's why I say when I look at guys like Jason Tatum, if you look at Toronto, Toronto's loaded with guys like Van Vliet or like that mentality, that bulldog gonna, get my nose dirty.
Chip on your shoulder guy.
That's what this team is missing.
Yeah.
Like who's the badass on the Utah Jazz right now?
There's not one.
There's not one. If I look at the Lakers, it is absolutely LeBron James. It is absolutely Anthony Davis when he's healthy.
Montrez.
Trez, exactly right. You know who else is missing this? The LA Clippers. This is why the Clippers miss Trez incredibly.
Yeah.
I look at Denver.
Denver's got all kinds.
All Denver's got is that kind of player.
Yeah.
Jokic, Jamal Murray's not somebody you want to. It's that junkyard dog. It's that dark alley situation. I wouldn't want to run into Jamal Murray.
No,
he's a tough SOB.
Yeah.
So I look at the elite teams in this league. I think James Harden's that guy. I think Kyrie Irving is less that guy, but boy, is he clutch.
Yeah.
I look at Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's shown that he's not going to shrink from anything.
And that's why I say I think the Jazz as a squad are just short on resources. They're just short on resources, and they don't have. Again, I know we say this all the time, like, hey, they need one more player, or they need this, or they need that, but truly, right now, I really feel like if you could replace Bogdanovic with some sort of a guy who can get his own bucket at any time, that does not need to be set up or anything, and has that mentality, that would help. That would take this team to such another level, because it would take the pressure off of Donovan, and it would mitigate Rudy Gobert's lack of a jump shot. But they don't have that, so those are all issues on a nightly basis.
I wonder if the Jazz get a guy like I read an article about Hassan Whiteside, or a guy that can be defensive but is more mobile. I wonder about that. I wonder if you are a team like Portland.
Yeah.
Because Portland's on the cusp. There's so many teams in the West right now that are just on the cusp. But I look at the Lakers. I don't expect the Lakers to make a big deal. I think if they go and get an Andre Drummond, once he gets bought out, okay, that's a deal I could see them doing. They're not going to go and change their roster. The Jazz are likely not. They should. The Jazz absolutely should go get somebody. They won't.
Yeah.
Look at who else is in the Phoenix Suns. Do you think the Phoenix Suns are going to shake up that roster? Everybody's talked about this DeAndre Ayton trade.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing that at this point.
I think that would be an amazing move by them. It would be impressive. But yeah, will they actually do it? No, I don't have faith that they'll actually go and do something. No.
Yeah. I think John Collins is a really interesting name. And I think Atlanta is not very good. I think what we're seeing in Atlanta is Trae Young and John Collins are very close.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're not going to see a John Collins deal.
Yeah.
I think their chemistry, they had that alley-oop off the backboard last night. They clearly like each other. They spend a ton of time together off the floor. But I feel like every time we get into this trade deadline discussion, his name comes up.
Well, yeah, because he's a hell of a player. If you don't know John Collins, you should YouTube some tape on him. He's a very Mobile player. He's got hops for days. He's a willing defender, which is huge.
Put
Think
him
about
in
it
that
this
Blazer
way.
lineup,
You know
bro.
what? Here's a player that I think that would really help the Jazz, and that would be Spencer Dinwiddie. Okay, Spencer Dinwiddie for the Jazz would be a huge upgrade, and just in terms of having that chip on your shoulder. I mean, if you had, think about it this way: if you would replace, if Spencer was your backup center, or you could even start him at the 4, and then you could still play the game that you play with Rudy and Favors, that would be huge because Dinwiddie is a guy who basically wants to beat you up every time you come to the rim. And if you had him, that would totally change the outlook of Jazz games. Now, he's not a wing scorer, so it's still going to be pressure on Donovan, but I just think that Dinwiddie is less of a giraffe. In the paint, he can move better than Gobert can move, and he can still get up with the best of them. And so that's why I would be in favor of that.
Well, and I also think this PJ Tucker deal to Milwaukee is significant.
Yeah.
I think that's one big chip off of the defensive, trade targets.
Yeah.
He was somebody that a lot of people were chasing. I think that starts it. But, just looking at a lot of the conversations around the trade deadline, I do think the Washington Wizards are in the middle of that. And, I just wonder, I wonder what they do. I don't know how you stand pat if you're bad teams in the East. Because if you're a bad team in the Eastern Conference of the NBA, I mean, you're a really bad team.
Yeah, because the West is a superior conference. So if you're not even good in the East, what are we doing?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for sure. I know a lot of you have commented this morning. I appreciate that. Barry said, what do you guys think the Knicks are going to do? Julius Randle is playing at an incredible high level. Do you see them making any kind of change? I don't. I think if you're the Knicks, you're not championship caliber. So you're probably not going to go and try to make some significant move to go and get an addition if you're the Knicks. I think if you're the Knicks, you probably stand pat, don't you?
Yeah, I think you stand pat, and I also think that that you can get into the postseason this year. You're not gonna win the championship, obviously, like you were just saying.
Right.
But I think it would be a huge thing for your fans just to get to the postseason, just to see a Knick uniform on a national playoff game would be amazing.
Yeah.
So I think that I think they're probably going to stand pat right now.
Well, and the other thing that is so interesting to me, and I'm curious how many people really look at this kind of stuff because obviously Tyler does. Tyler and I tend to message back and forth about gambling lines a lot. And he's talking about how the Jazz are a 5-point favorite in Tampa over Toronto tonight. I'm really surprised by that.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by that. But Tyler's point is, I don't think you make any move. I don't think you take Bogey out of the starting lineup. What's the point? He's one of the guys that got you here, and just remember back to the bubble how much they missed him. He's not the same guy.
Yeah,
something
that's
happened.
The problem.
Yeah, something happened. Something's wrong. Something is something that's something. I don't know what's going on with Bogdanovic. But when Donovan Mitchell struggles, at least you still get production.
Yeah.
Bojan Bogdanovic last night repeatedly got blown up defensively, and it's a trend that's continuing. I think you have to make a move with him because when you look at the highlights of this game, if he's not defending, Rudy Gobert gets massively exposed.
Yes.
Massively exposed.
Because Rudy can't get to the weak side fast enough.
Because he's got responsibilities.
Yeah.
I don't know. Look, I get it, Jazz fans, because Eric is saying the same thing. You guys are always pessimistic about the Jazz. Sadly, you've been right. Well, you know what? I mean, we might be pessimistic. I don't believe that we're being pessimistic.
Pessimistic is the wrong word, in my opinion. I think you can say it's pessimistic, but frankly, it's the truth. I mean, we're watching the game, we're telling you what happened, and we're telling you why it happened. So, I mean, everybody was saying that we were idiots in the first half of the season for telling you what was going to happen, and it's gone down. Not like literally everything that we've said is going to happen has happened, and it's because it's happening right in front of us. We don't have some, fairy dust. We're watching the games, and we're telling you, hey, this is what we're seeing. Yeah. This is the issues that are developing.
Lakers are the best team in the West right now. I mean, they're playing really good basketball. I think they've finally adjusted to not having AD.
Yeah, finally. It only took them 20 games, but,
But, I mean, he's such a big part of what they do. Lakers are the best team in the West. I feel good about that.